My name is Declan Shaw, and I serve as a park ranger in Washington State. I state this formally because the weight of duty, the badge, and the oath I carry are not things I take lightly. To outsiders, it may sound like a simple profession. Guiding tourists, ensuring trails remain safe, checking fire permits, and protecting wildlife. But here, in this place, those responsibilities are just the surface. Beneath them lies a current of unease that most people cannot sense, and many would not want to. For me, it has become a daily companion, a shadow draped over every ridge, valley, and forest hollow. Washington's wilderness is vast, older than memory, and something about it feels alive in ways we are not meant to understand. I have worked here long enough to know this. It is very strange here. On paper, my assigned district covers parts of the Cascade Range, a patchwork of deep valleys, hidden lakes, and trail systems that weave through stands of fir, cedar, and hemlock. The mountains rise like teeth, jagged and snow-capped even late into summer. When fog rolls through, the entire forest becomes a labyrinth of ghostly pillars, every trunk a shifting figure, every silence holding a question. Rangers joke about it, of course, about the Washington Weird, as some call it. But the laughter never lasts long, because each one of us has a story tucked away, something we refuse to tell tourists, something we sometimes refuse even to tell each other. I remember my first year here vividly. Back then, I thought strangeness meant simple things: unusual animal behavior, lost hikers turning up disoriented miles from where they should have been, compasses acting unreliable near certain cliffsides. Those were things I could rationalize. A magnetic anomaly here, exhaustion and dehydration there. The human mind seeks order, and I clung to it. But order doesn't last in these forests. There comes a night, sooner or later, when explanations no longer hold. One of the earliest incidents that unsettled me happened near Lake Valen. It was late September, the time when the mornings carry frost yet afternoons still burn with a stubborn sun. A hiker had reported eerie lights across the water, flickering in slow arcs like lanterns being swung. I was sent to investigate. I remember the crisp air, the way mist clung to the lake's surface like a low ceiling. At first, I saw nothing unusual, but as twilight deepened, pale glows rose on the far bank. They were not the orange of campfires, nor the hard white of flashlights. They had a bluish tint, almost aquatic, and they moved with a rhythm I couldn't place. I shouted across the water, announcing myself, but no voice returned. I tried to circle the shore, yet the closer I drew, the further away the lights seemed to recede. Finally, when darkness became total, they simply vanished. No trace remained. I filed my report, of course. Unverified light phenomenon, I wrote, citing possible reflections from distant campers. But I knew better. Reflections do not move against the line of shore, and they do not disappear the moment you acknowledge them. That was the beginning. Since then, the strangeness has thickened, layered itself into my routines like sediment. Small things at first. Paths where cairns rearrange themselves overnight. Trail markers that vanish. Echoing calls that return warped. Syllables stretched or shortened. I once found boot prints leading to a meadow's center, where no booted hiker could have walked, because the grass was chest-high, untouched, except for that single line of steps ending abruptly, as if their owner had evaporated. Tourists rarely see any of this. They come for the waterfalls, the alpine vistas, the clean air, and we, the rangers, do our best to give them the illusion of safety. We patch over gaps in reality with signage and maps. We warn about bears' avalanches, river crossings, but we do not warn about what stirs in the fog or whispers in the static when the radios hiss at 2 a.m. We keep those truths to ourselves. One evening, a more tangible incident forced me to question just how thin the line was between natural and unnatural. A group of college students had failed to return from a weekend hike near Eagle Crest Trail. Search and rescue mobilized, and I joined. We expected exhaustion, maybe twisted ankles, maybe a wrong turn. What we found was a campsite that made my stomach twist. Their gear was there, tents zipped, sleeping bags unfurled, food hung properly in bare bags, but no people, not a sign of struggle, not a drop of blood, only silence. The oddest detail was the fire. It had been extinguished deliberately, neatly doused with water. Everything about the scene suggested order, intention, yet the students themselves were gone. Hours later, we located them. Miles downslope, wandering barefoot along a scree field, their eyes glassy. They spoke little, only muttered about the voices from the tree line. When pressed, they denied remembering anything. Their feet were torn raw from rock and bramble, but none of them had answers. Officially, we listed it as a case of temporary disorientation, possibly hallucinogenic substances. Unofficially, I knew that explanation was too easy. Night patrols are the worst. You learn quickly that the forest never truly sleeps. Owls call, coyotes yip. The wind moans through snags. Those are the natural voices. But there are others. Once, while hiking a switchback under a waning moon, I heard footsteps behind me. Measured, steady, always 2 or 3 paces back. I stopped, the sound stopped. I turned, and nothing was there but a trail of damp, ferns nodding as if brushed by someone unseen. I told myself it was my own echo, though footsteps do not echo on soil. Another time, I was manning the fire tower at Grindle Peak. The lookout windows reflected the room at night, a mirror of lantern glow and shadow. But when I shifted my gaze, I caught reflections of movement, figures crossing behind me, tall and indistinct. I spun, heart hammering. Yet the room was empty. The radio crackled just then, though no one spoke. Sometimes I wonder if the glass itself remembers things, showing what does not belong to the present. Over the years, I have started writing personal rules, a quiet survival guide. Rule 1, never follow strange lights. Rule 2, when echoes do not match your words, leave. Rule 3, if you hear your own name whispered where no one should be, do not respond. These rules are not in any handbook. They are mine alone, born from experience. And though I cannot prove their necessity, I trust them more than the compass I carry. Bad decisions happen when you dismiss instincts, when you assume the forest is only what science declares it to be. I learned that the hard way last winter. The snow had come heavy, burying the lower passes and sealing off all but a few trails. A solo backpacker was overdue, last seen near Shale Ridge. I volunteered to scout, despite the storm brewing. That was my mistake. The air burned with ice, visibility a mere 50 feet. My radio connection faltered with static. I should have turned back, but duty and stubbornness drove me forward. At dusk, I reached a grove where the snow lay strangely undisturbed, flat and smooth as glass. My boots left impressions, but only briefly. Within minutes, the snow re-leveled itself, my tracks erased. The silence there was total, so complete it pressed against my skull. Then came the sound, not wind, not animal, but a chorus of whispers threaded together, speaking in tones just below comprehension. I froze. I cannot recall the exact words, only that they carried weight, like commands not meant for human ears. The air vibrated with them. Panic broke me from the trance. I stumbled backward, trying to retrace steps that no longer existed. My flashlight beam seemed swallowed, absorbed by the still snow. For what felt like hours, I fought through that grove, until at last I burst onto a ridgeline where the storm resumed its roar and the world returned to something I could name. I never found the backpacker. We never did. That night, I added a new rule: never enter the groves where sound dies. People often ask me why I stay, if the work is so heavy with dread. I ask myself the same question. Part of it is duty. Parks need rangers, and I chose this path knowing it would not be simple. Part of it is curiosity, though that is a dangerous thing here. And part of it is because in a strange way, I feel the forest has claimed me. Leaving would not free me. It would follow. I feel it sometimes even off duty, in town, in my apartment. The faint sense of being observed, of rules continuing beyond the tree line. Washington State is a land of immense beauty. That beauty hides teeth. Tourists will always see the waterfalls, the glaciers, the eagles wheeling overhead. But for those of us who patrol the trails after sunset, who step into places unmarked on maps, we know another truth. It is very strange here, stranger than words can fully shape. And the longer I remain, the more I fear that strangeness is shaping me. The weeks following that winter search were uneasy ones. Officially, my report listed the backpacker as missing, presumed dead, likely succumbed to the storm. But every time I reread my own words, they felt hollow. I had not lost him to the cold or cliffs. I had lost him to that grove where sound itself suffocated, and that was something I could never write on paper. The brass in Olympia do not like myths in their files. They like statistics, bullet points, tidy conclusions. I gave them that, but I kept the truth to myself. Silence between rangers is heavy. We share enough to keep each other safe, but never everything. Still, I noticed the look some of my colleagues gave me after that mission. A couple of them asked casual questions. Did I see anything strange? Was the snow deeper up there than usual? Had I heard anything unusual on the radio? Their tone was light, but their eyes told me they already knew pieces of the truth. They were waiting to see if I'd break the code and say it aloud. I didn't. Instead, I returned to patrols, my boots crunching down frozen paths, my breath a fog in the air. Yet I carried new unease, an itch beneath the skin that refused to settle. I found myself scanning tree lines more often, flinching at echoes, avoiding groves where snow lay too smooth. I was becoming cautious to the point of paranoia. But paranoia keeps you alive out here. One night, while covering a backcountry cabin check, I encountered something that has stayed lodged in my mind like a splinter. The cabin itself was routine, a log structure, stocked with firewood and a metal bunk. My duty was simple: inspect for storm damage, clear the chimney, ensure supplies were intact. I did all that, yet as dusk bled across the mountains, I lingered, reluctant to leave. Something about the air felt charged, like static before lightning. I stepped outside to secure the shutters. That was when I saw it. Across the clearing, about 30 yards into the trees, a figure stood watching me. Too far for me to make out details, just the outline of a person, tall, motionless, as though carved from shadow. My first thought was a stranded hiker, but the figure made no sound, no movement, even when I called out. I lifted my flashlight. The beam struck the trees, but the figure cast no reflection, no glint of eyes, no fabric catching the light. It simply dissolved into the darkness, as though it had never been there. That night I chose to sleep, inside the cabin with the shutters bolted tight. But sleep did not come easily. Twice I woke to faint tapping on the glass, deliberate and slow. Each time I gripped my sidearm, heart pounding, waiting for the noise to return. It never did. At dawn, when I finally opened the shutters, no tracks marred the snow outside. I told myself it was the wind, branches, perhaps even exhaustion conjuring shapes. But the truth, I knew it had been watching me. Something that didn't need footprints. Something that comes to see if you'll follow. Bad decisions often grow from curiosity, and curiosity gnawed at me the next week when a tourist reported strange sounds along a seldom used trail. Against my better judgment, I volunteered to investigate alone. The trail was narrow, twisting through thick fir groves where light barely reached the ground. Snowmelt gurgled in rivulets, masking softer noises. I walked slowly, ears straining. Then I heard it: laughter. Not loud, not joyous. Thin, stretched laughter, like children imitating joy, but without understanding it. The sound circled me, moving tree to tree. I froze, scanning the undergrowth, hand on my radio. But the moment I considered calling it in, the laughter shifted. It changed into my own voice, repeating words I had not spoken. Declan Shaw, it whispered, in perfect mimicry of how I'd introduced myself a week earlier during a trailhead briefing. Hearing my name in my own cadence chilled me more than any winter wind. I turned back, refusing to go deeper. Rule 4: when the forest speaks in your voice, leave. The rest of that shift passed without incident. But I knew the strangeness was tightening around me. It was no longer rare, isolated moments. It was creeping into routine. Even the radio betrayed me. Static would hiss, then form syllables not meant for language. Once it carried the sound of footsteps pacing across hardwood, though I was miles from any cabin. Another time, the channel filled with what sounded like waves crashing, though I was 40 miles inland. These were not glitches. I know the difference between interference and intent. There was one colleague I trusted enough to confide in, Nora Bell, another ranger who had served the Cascades longer than me. Nora carried herself with a calm weight, the kind of person who had seen enough strangeness to stop pretending it wasn't real. When I mentioned the laughter, she didn't laugh or roll her eyes. She simply nodded and said, "They've noticed you." Her words unsettled me more than the event itself. "They?" I asked, though I didn't want the answer. She only shrugged. "The ones who make this place strange. We don't give them names. Don't give them power by naming them." I pressed further, but she ended the conversation there. Still, her tone confirmed what I already suspected. The other rangers had their own rules, their own stories, locked tight behind cautious silences. The following month brought a search and rescue mission that remains the most disturbing of my career. A father and son had gone missing after failing to return from a weekend fishing trip at Hidden Pines Lake. When we located their camp, the scene was too familiar: tent neat, supplies intact, fire put out. But there was something else this time. In the soft dirt beside the fire ring, 2 sets of footprints circled the camp over and over, as though the pair had walked endlessly through the night. The loops crisscrossed until the ground was churned, yet no prints led outward. They had simply circled until vanishing. We spread out, calming the area. Hours later, we found the boy alone near the lakeshore, shivering and mute. His father was gone. The boy never spoke again, at least not to us. Every question, every gentle prompt, was met with silence and wide, haunted eyes. I sometimes wonder if he heard the same voices I did, if they spoke to him in his father's tones, pulling him deeper until only one of them returned. That night, back at base, Nora found me staring at my hands as though I might find answers there. She sat beside me and said softly, "Sometimes they take one, sometimes they give one back. We don't get to choose which." Her voice carried no judgment, only the weight of someone who had stopped expecting fairness from the forest long ago. After that case, my rules grew stricter. Rule 5: never camp at Hidden Pines. Rule 6: when footprints circle without end, do not follow them. Spring arrived, and with it came thaw, runoff, and new hikers flooding the trails. Strangeness does not stop when the tourists arrive, it only adapts. A family once reported their daughter vanishing from the trail for nearly an hour. She reappeared unharmed, skipping down the path as though nothing had happened, though her parents swore they had searched every direction. When I gently asked the girl where she had been, she smiled and said, "With the nice lady who knew my name." No description, no tracks, nothing. Another visitor insisted the mountains spelled words at night. He had photographs, blurry, long exposure shots of stars. At first glance, they were nothing but streaks of light. but the longer I stared, the more I thought I saw crooked letters hidden in the constellations. I dismissed him publicly, but in private, I stored his photos away. Sometimes I still look at them, and I can't decide whether they're tricks of light or something deliberate. Bad decision I kept those photos. I should have burned them. My apartment, once a safe retreat in town, grew less comforting. I began waking at 3:17 a.m. precisely, heart pounding, ears straining for sounds I couldn't name. Some nights I swore I heard knocking. 3 times, always 3, though the door remained untouched by morning. My reflection in the mirror once lingered a second too long. Its blink delayed. I told myself exhaustion was to blame, the accumulation of sleepless nights and heavy patrols. But in truth, I wondered if the strangeness had followed me home, as I had long feared it might. One evening, as I left headquarters, Nora stopped me. "You should take leave," she said quietly. "If you stay too long, they'll notice more." They always notice more. Her warning unsettled me, because I knew she wasn't speaking metaphorically. She meant it literally. The forest was watching, choosing, marking. And perhaps my presence, my attention, was feeding it. I never requested leave. I told myself duty mattered more. But in honesty, I stayed because part of me wanted to see how far it would go. That was my worst mistake. The forest has a way of peeling back your defenses slowly, so that you hardly notice how vulnerable you've become until it is too late. After Nora's warning, I told myself I would trade carefully. But carefully, in these woods, is never enough. You can follow every protocol, every safety measure, every unspoken rule, and still find yourself staring into something you should never have seen. It was late May when the incident happened that finally shattered any pretense of normalcy in my life. A storm had rolled through, dropping heavy rain that swelled the rivers and loosened the mountainsides. I was dispatched to check a suspension bridge on the Alder Creek Trail, making sure it hadn't washed out. Routine work. I hiked in through mist so thick it seemed to breathe, every step muffled, the world reduced to the circle of trail under my boots. When I reached the bridge, I found it intact but slick with rain. The creek below was a torrent, brown water thrashing at boulders, foam spraying like shattered glass. I made notes for the maintenance team, then lingered a moment, gripping the wet ropes and staring down at the current. That was when I heard it, a faint voice carried on the rush of water. At first I thought it was radio static, but the words grew clearer. It was my name, Declan, drawn out, distorted, but unmistakable. My first instinct was to deny it. Sound travels strangely near water, I told myself. Perhaps another ranger calling, though I knew I was alone. But the longer I listened, the more insistent it became. Declan, come. The syllables rose and fell with the current, woven into its rhythm. Against my better judgment, I leaned over the ropes, trying to pinpoint the source. That was my mistake. The fog shifted, and suddenly I saw someone standing on the far side of the bridge. A man, or the shape of one, blurred by distance and mist. He was dressed like a ranger, green jacket, wide brim hat. Familiar. Too familiar. As I squinted, my stomach dropped. The face was mine. It didn't move. It didn't wave. It only stood, head tilted slightly, lips shaping my name, though the voice still came from the water below. I froze, paralyzed by the impossibility of it. My breath fogged the air, my knuckles white against the rope. And then, without warning, the figure turned and walked into the tree line, dissolving into mist. I wanted to believe it was exhaustion, a trick of light. But deep down, I knew the forest had shown me something deliberate, something designed to draw me forward. Rule 7, when you see yourself across the bridge, do not cross. I reported the bridge intact, nothing more. I didn't mention the figure. I didn't mention the voice. But in the nights that followed, I began to dream of that moment. In the dreams, I always followed. I always stepped onto the slick planks, drawn to the shape of myself waiting. And every time, the bridge gave way, hurling me into the torrent. I would wake choking, lungs burning. Sheets tangled as though I had fought against drowning in my sleep. The dreams wore me thin. By day, I stumbled through patrols, nerves fraying. Even the tourists began to notice. A woman once asked if I was part of the exhibit, joking about how pale I looked, how hollow my eyes were. I forced a laugh, but the comment cut deeper than it should have, because I knew the forest was hollowing me out. Then came the radio call. Dispatch reported faint emergency pings from an unlisted frequency somewhere near Raven's Hollow, a region I hated. The hollow was a basin of tangled undergrowth and deadfall, where compasses spun and GPS signals faltered. I had avoided it whenever possible, citing difficult terrain. This time, I couldn't avoid it. The distress signal was clear enough that we had to investigate. I went with another ranger, a younger man named Harris, still full of the nada-v energy I once had. He joked as we hiked in, trying to lighten the mood, but I could tell even he felt the unease. The air grew colder the deeper we went, though the sun was high overhead. Ravens wheeled above us, their cries sharp as knives. By the time we reached the basin floor, even Harris had gone quiet. The signal led us to a clearing where an old, half-collapsed shelter leaned against a cedar. No one was inside, but our radios hissed to life the moment we stepped across the threshold. Static, then a voice. Not just any voice, Harris's. "Help me," it said, faint, distorted, but undeniably him. "I'm lost." Harris went rigid, color draining from his face. The voice repeated, stronger this time. "Help me, please," he swore, fumbling with the dial, insisting it was some kind of interference. But the voice kept coming, threading through the static with growing desperation. "Please. I can't find the trail." I told him firmly, "Do not answer it. Rule 8, when the forest uses your voice, silence is survival." But Harris was young, stubborn. He raised his radio and called back. "I'm here." "We're here." The forest went dead silent. Not a bird, not a breath of wind. The hair on my arms lifted. Then, from the tree line across the clearing, we heard movement. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling, something heavy approaching. Harris lifted his flashlight, but the beam revealed nothing. Yet the sound drew closer, circling us, slow and deliberate. We backed away from the shelter, every muscle screaming to run. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The silence returned. Our radios clicked back to normal channels, no trace of the phantom voice. We left immediately. Harris tried to mask his fear with nervous chatter, but his hands shook on the straps of his pack. Back at base, he refused to log the incident. "Malfunction," he wrote. "False signal." But I could see the truth in his eyes. He would never enter Raven's Hollow again. Neither would I. That night, I added another rules. When the forest calls for help in your own voice, it is not you. In the weeks that followed, Harris grew withdrawn. He skipped shifts, avoided eye contact. Eventually, he requested transfer to another district. I didn't blame him. I almost envied him. As for me, the strangeness only deepened. I began noticing patterns, repetition in events, as though the forest recycled its tricks, refining them. Lights across water, echoes in groves, figures on bridges, voices on radios. Each incident sharper, closer, more tailored to me. It felt less like coincidence and more like attention. The forest was not just strange, it was aware. I started keeping journals, scribbling observations late at night. The entries grew frantic, pages filled with sketches of footprints that ended abruptly, diagrams of constellations shifting into shapes that shouldn't exist. I never showed them to anyone. They were not for proof. They were for me, to remind myself that it was real, that I was not inventing it. But some nights, even the journals betrayed me. I would wake to find words written in a hand that wasn't mine, curved letters pressed too deep into the paper. Once, across a page I had left blank, a single line had appeared, "We see you." That was the night I stopped writing. I tried distraction, hiking with groups, patrolling only in daylight, filling silence with music. None of it worked. The forest has a way of finding you, no matter how you try to hide. One morning, while leading a volunteer cleanup crew, I noticed every compass they carried spun wildly for nearly 10 minutes. The volunteers laughed nervously, calling it a Bermuda Triangle thing. I forced a grin, but my stomach churned, because the compasses only spun while I stood with them. When I stepped back, they steadied. That was when I understood. I was no longer just a ranger patrolling strange land. I was part of its strangeness now. The realization pressed on me in every moment, even outside the forest, in town. Shop windows reflected shapes that weren't behind me. Street lamps flickered when I walked beneath them. My neighbors whispered that I looked thinner, older, though weeks had passed. I stopped answering calls from family. What could I say? That the woods were following me home, that I no longer trusted mirrors. Still, I stayed. Perhaps duty, perhaps stubbornness, perhaps something darker. Pull I could not escape. The forest had its hooks in me, and I knew it. One evening, as the sun bled crimson across the Cascades, Nora found me again. She studied me for a long moment, then said, "They're circling you now. You have to decide, leave or let them in." Her words have haunted me since. Leave or let them in. What happens if I let them in? What happens if I leave? I have not answered those questions yet. But the forest will not wait forever. Nora's words dug into me like barbs. Leave or let them in. The choice sounded simple, but it was anything but. Leaving would mean abandoning duty, abandoning the people who came here for safety, who trusted that rangers like me would protect them. Letting them in, whatever that meant, felt like surrendering to something I could never understand. Neither option gave me peace, so I kept walking the line, continuing my patrols, following my routines, clinging to the illusion that I still had control. But the forest knew. It always knows. And the harder I tried to hold on to normalcy, the more it unraveled. June came with long days and warm light that should have banished shadows, but in these woods, shadows do not obey the sun. I was checking a trail near Ridgepoint Bluff when I noticed them stretching wrong, slanting in a direction the light did not cast, long and thin like ink spills running uphill. My own shadow lagged a half-second behind my movements. It raised its hand fractionally later, turned its head fractionally slower. Watching that delay made my stomach twist. I walked faster, then faster still, until I was nearly running. Only when I broke into an open meadow did it snap back into sync. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. How long had it been out of step before I noticed? How often do we walk with shadows that aren't our own? A week later, I was assigned to lead a guided hike for a troop of scouts. 12 kids, bright-eyed, chattering, followed by 2 wary adults. We started early, the trail weaving through cedar groves fragrant with sap and sunlight. The kids asked the usual questions. How old were the trees? Did bears really live here? Had I ever seen a mountain lion? I answered patiently, masking my fatigue. But halfway through the hike, one of the boys tugged my sleeve. He pointed into the trees. "There's another ranger," he whispered. I frowned. We weren't expecting backup. I glanced where he pointed, and my chest tightened. There, between the trunks, stood a figure in uniform, hat brim low, hands folded behind his back. Watching, too far for detail, but close enough to see the outline. I forced a smile for the boy. "Just shadows," I said. But when I looked again, the figure was gone. The rest of the hike passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the fear that the children had seen it too. When we returned to the trailhead, I asked casually if anyone else had noticed the extra ranger. Several nodded. One girl said, "Yeah, he waved at us. He looked just like you." That night I wrote another rule. Rule 9: never trust the ones who look like me. By midsummer, the forest's pressure felt constant. Nights were the worst. I would wake to faint music drifting through the trees. Notes played on instruments I couldn't place, half banjo, half violin, always just at the edge of hearing. If I listened too long, sleep fled entirely. Once I gave in and followed the sound, stepping barefoot outside my cabin. The night was warm, stars sharp above the ridge. The music lured me down the path, steady, coaxing. I followed until I reached the creek, and there it stopped. Silence, not even crickets. The water ran black and still, though no wind stirred. I returned to my cabin shaken, knowing I had come one step too close to whatever lay waiting. Bad decision. I followed the music. Around this time, tourists began to vanish again. A couple on a weekend backpacking trip. A solo hiker photographing wildflowers. Their disappearances were quiet, barely noticed by the outside world, but every ranger here felt the weight of them. I combed their campsites, searching for clues. Each one told the same story: neat order, deliberate exits, no panic, no struggle. As if they had simply obeyed a call. Nora confronted me one evening after another fruitless search. "It's circling tighter around you," she said, eyes hard. "I see it. Everyone sees it. What does it want?" I asked, my voice breaking with the question I had been too afraid to say aloud. Her silence stretched, heavy as stone. At last she whispered, "Maybe just recognition." Recognition. The word chilled me, because I already felt it pressing in, waiting for me to acknowledge it fully, to speak to it, to meet its gaze. And I knew that once I did, something irreversible would happen. Still, I pressed on with my duties, pretending I was still in control. One patrol in July nearly ended me. I had been sent to clear debris from a storm, damaged trail near Granite Spire. The day was hot, insects thick in the air, sweat stinging my eyes. I worked with axe and saw, clearing fallen limbs, humming to myself to keep nerves steady. Then I heard footsteps, crisp, deliberate, approaching from behind. I turned, expecting another ranger. Instead, I saw myself again, standing at the bend in the trail 30 yards back. Same uniform, same hat, same posture, watching silently. This time, rage surged through my fear. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. My voice cracked against the trees. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. Then slowly, it raised one hand and pointed deeper into the woods, a direction off trail into thick undergrowth. I refused. I turned back to my work, hard hammering, sweat chilling on my skin. When I looked again, it was gone. But the point lingered in my mind, gnawing, deeper into the woods, always deeper. That night I couldn't eat, couldn't rest. My dreams showed endless trails spiraling inward, always inward, towards some center I could never reach. And each time, waiting at the center, was me. I tried confiding in Nora again, but she only shook her head. "It's already marked you," she said softly. "The rest is only waiting." Her words left me hollow. Marked, chosen, not for duty, not for recognition, but for something far stranger. Soon after, my apartment in town stopped feeling safe. I woke one night to find the hallway darker than it should have been, as if the shadows themselves had thickened. In the mirror, my reflection's mouth twitched into a smile a second before mine. And one morning, when I opened my journal, I found pages filled with handwriting that wasn't mine. Words scrawled in uneven lines: "You are almost ready." I burned the journal in my sink. The flames hissed, filling the room with acrid smoke. But I knew it was too late. The words were in me now. By August, I noticed that even the other rangers had begun avoiding me. Conversations stopped when I entered the room. Requests for joint patrols never included my name. It was as if they sensed what Nora had already told me, that I had been marked, and they wanted no part of it. I couldn't blame them. I wouldn't want me either. One day, returning from patrol, I found a note pinned to my cabin door. No signature, but I knew it was from Nora. Don't wait until it asks twice. I stood there a long time, staring at the paper fluttering in the breeze. My stomach twisted, because I already knew what she meant. The figure on the trail had pointed once, and sooner or later it would point again. That evening, as dusk thickened over the ridges, I sat alone on the porch, shotgun across my knees, eyes scanning the tree line. The forest pulsed with insect hum, with the sigh of wind through branches, normal sounds, ordinary sounds, but beneath them, I felt the deeper rhythm, the one that waited for me to acknowledge it, to recognize it, to follow. I don't know how long I sat there, breathing shallow, watching shadows lengthen across the clearing. At last, I whispered aloud, "I see you." The forest hushed. Every cricket, every leaf, every breath of air fell silent. And then, from deep in the woods came the sound of footsteps, steady, approaching. The footsteps came slow and steady, measured like a heartbeat. They didn't rush or falter, as though whoever, or whatever, walked toward me knew there was no need to hurry. My grip tightened on the shotgun resting across my lap, but part of me already knew it was useless. Firearms work against bears, against mountain lions, against men. They don't work against the strangeness here. The porch boards creaked under me as I rose, straining to see through the trees. The clearing was steeped in dusk, edges blurring as night claimed the ridges. For a moment, I told myself it could be another ranger, maybe Nora, coming to check on me, but no one in uniform walks like that. Too deliberate, too exact, each step falling with unnatural rhythm. The footsteps stopped at the tree line. My pulse thundered. The woods stood black still. Then, slowly, a figure stepped forward. It was me. Same jacket, same hat, same lines of the face, as if a mirror had peeled from its frame and wandered free. The only difference was the eyes. They caught what little light remained, reflecting it back pale and wrong, like the sheen of a predator in the dark. I raised the shotgun. My double did not flinch. It only tilted its head, studying me with faint curiosity, as though I were the imitation. Its lips parted, and though I braced for sound, none came. The silence pressed heavy, thick enough to choke. Finally, it raised one hand and pointed again, into the woods, deeper, always deeper. My stomach clenched. This was the second time. Nora's note burned in my mind. Don't wait until it asks twice. I should have stayed on the porch. I should have ignored it, written another rule in my head and locked the door. But I didn't. Some force heavier than will pulled at me, a gravity that words can't explain. Against every instinct, I stepped down off the porch and into the clearing. The figure turned without a sound and walked into the trees. I followed. The forest swallowed me quickly. The clearing's faint light faded behind me, replaced by shadows thick as tar. Branches snagged my sleeves, roots clawed at my boots, yet I pressed on. The figure moved just ahead, always visible, never more than 20 feet away. Its gait was smooth, gliding, untouched by obstacles. I tried calling out once, "What do you want?" But my voice seemed to fall flat, absorbed by the dark. We walked for what felt like hours, though time bent strangely there. The trail vanished long ago, yet the figure moved with certainty, weaving through gullies and rises I barely managed to cross. My breath came ragged, sweat cold on my back despite the night air. At last, the trees parted into a clearing I had never seen before. The ground there was bare, no grass, no undergrowth, only soil dark and damp, as though freshly turned. At the center stood a cairn of stones, taller than me, balanced precariously yet unmoving. My double stopped before it and faced me. The silence deepened. Not even wind stirred the branches above. I felt as though the world itself was holding its breath. Then the figure raised both hands and pressed its palms flat against its own chest. Slowly, deliberately, it spread its arms wide, as though inviting me forward. I shook my head, stepping back. No. My voice cracked in the stillness. Its expression did not change, but the air around me did. A pressure built, dense and suffocating, as though the forest leaned in waiting. My knees weakened. The urge to step forward grew unbearable, like a command embedded beneath my skin. And then, faintly, I heard a voice. Not mine this time, Nora's, whispered, strained, as though carried on a long-forgotten wind. "Declan, don't." I spun, searching, but the trees were empty. When I turned back, the figure was gone. Only the cairn remained, looming in the center of the clearing. I don't remember the walk back. My next memory is standing outside my cabin at dawn, boots caked with mud, shotgun still clutched in my hands. My body ached, lungs raw, as if I had run miles. The journal I had burned sat on the porch railing, intact, pages fluttering in the breeze. Across the open page, new words scrawled in jagged strokes. "You are almost ready." I should have left then. Packed my gear, handed in my badge. Vanished from Washington and never looked back. But something in me was already entangled too deeply. It wasn't just duty anymore. It was a tether, binding me to the forest. The days blurred after that. Each patrol carried a weight I couldn't shake. Tourists' voices seemed distant, unreal. Even my colleagues treated me with wary distance, as if I carried contagion. Harris never spoke to me again before he transferred out. And Nora avoided me altogether, her gaze heavy whenever our paths crossed, but her mouth sealed. One night, unable to sleep, I walked to the ranger station. The place was empty at that hour, lit only by the soft glow of desk lamps. On the main bulletin board, pinned among routine memos, I saw something that stopped me cold. A map of the district, dotted with pins marking missing persons, their campsites, their last known trails. The pins formed no random scatter. They arced inward, spiraling toward a single point. The same clearing I had been led to, the cairn at its heart. My stomach dropped. The forest wasn't random. It was funneling them, one by one, toward that place. And now me. I stumbled back from the board, bile rising. The silence of the station pressed around me, oppressive. Then the radio on the desk crackled. Static hissed, then cleared into a voice I knew too well. "Declan." My own voice. "Certain. It's time." The map pins seemed to vibrate in the lamplight. My knees gave out, and I sank into the nearest chair, hands shaking. My voice repeated from the radio, softer now, almost coaxing. "Come home." I yanked the plug from the wall, silencing it. But the words lingered in the air long after. That was 3 nights ago. Since then, the forest has not let me rest. My reflection lingers too long in mirrors. My shadow twists against walls. The cairn haunts my dreams. Every time I close my eyes, I see my double waiting, arms spread wide. I haven't seen Nora again. Sometimes I wonder if the whisper I heard in the clearing was real, or if even she has been taken, folded into the voices that play like a broken record through these woods. Tonight I sit at my desk, writing this by lantern light. The journal lies open before me, its pages filling without my hand. Words scrawl across them, neat and measured, telling me what comes next. The cairn, over and over, until the letters blur into black masses. I don't know how long I can resist, but I do know this. The forest has marked me, the cairn waits, and the longer I deny it, the stronger its pull becomes. Soon, I fear, I will follow. I lasted 3 days before the pull became unbearable. 3 nights of half sleep, of dreams that opened into the same clearing, the same cairn rising against the stars. Each morning I woke with mud on my boots, though I hadn't left my cabin. Each dawn the journal filled itself, repeating the same word, until it carved into my thoughts calm. By the fourth evening, I knew resistance was pointless. I strapped on my pack, checked my flashlight, slung the shotgun across my back. I told myself it was reconnaissance, not surrender. But I wasn't fooling anyone, not myself, not the forest. The air was heavy as I left the cabin, a stillness that seemed to hold its breath. No wind stirred the branches, no owls hooted from the trees. Even the insects were silent, as if all living things had withdrawn. The trail under my boots felt wrong, too smooth, too direct, as though it had reshaped itself to guide me. I walked for hours, though fatigue never set in. The woods bent around me, paths converging, gullies flattening, obstacles vanishing before I reached them. It was leading me, and I was letting it. At last I reached the clearing. The cairn loomed at its center, taller than before, stones slick with damp. They should have toppled under their own weight, yet they balanced perfectly, each one pressed against the next like vertebrae of a great spine. Mist curled around its base, coiling upward like breath, and waiting before it was my double. He stood motionless, hands folded behind his back, head tilted slightly as though studying me. His eyes reflected the pale light, catching every flicker of my lantern. When I stopped at the clearing's edge, he raised a hand and beckoned. I should have turned back. I should have run. But my legs carried me forward, one step at a time, until I stood at the foot of the cairn. The air pressed thick around me, charged with static. My double stepped aside, leaving the cairn bare between us. The stones vibrated faintly, a hum low enough to feel in my bones. I reached out without meaning to, hand trembling. My palm brushed cold stone. At once the hum surged into a roar, filling my skull with pressure. Images crashed through my mind, faces of the missing, their eyes blank, their mouths moving without sound. Forests folding endlessly inward, paths spiraling tighter, always toward this point. And then I saw myself standing among them. I ripped my hand away, gasping. The hum faded, though the echo lingered in my chest. My double hadn't moved. He only watched, patient, expectant. "You want me," I whispered, throat raw. It nodded once. My knees threatened to buckle. The journal's words, Nora's warnings, the maps of missing hikers, all of it converged here. This was the center, the heart of the strangeness, and it wanted me to step fully inside. But something else stirred then, faint but unmistakable, a whisper. My name carried gently across the clearing, not from the cairn, but from the trees. It was Nora's voice, clearer this time, desperate. "Declan, don't." I spun, heart hammering. The tree line rippled with shadow, branches shifting. For an instant, I swore I saw her face between the trunks, pale and strained, eyes wide. But as I blinked, she was gone. Only silence remained. When I turned back, my double was closer, just a few feet away now, mirroring my posture exactly. Every muscle in me screamed to move, to fight, to flee, but my body felt heavy, locked in place. The figure leaned forward, and for the first time, it spoke. "You are ready." The words were my own, my voice pulled from my throat, yet hollow, drained of warmth. The world tilted. The cairn pulsed like a beating heart, stones glowing faintly from within. Shadows lengthened unnaturally across the clearing, stretching toward me like grasping hands. The pressure inside my skull sharpened into a command: step forward. Bad decision, I obeyed. I placed one foot against the base of the cairn. The ground sank beneath me, soft as flesh. The stones shifted, opening into a narrow gap like a mouth parting its teeth. A cold wind exhaled from within, carrying the scent of earth long sealed. My double stepped back, arms spreading wide, as though welcoming me home. Panic surged, snapping my paralysis. I stumbled away, tearing my foot free, heart pounding so violently I thought it might burst. The stones ground shut, the glow fading. My double's smile flickered once, then dissolved into the mist. I fled. Branches tore at my arms, roots clawed my boots. but I didn't stop running until the clearing was long gone behind me. My lungs burned, throat raw, vision blurred. When at last I collapsed against a log, gasping for air, the forest had returned to its ordinary sounds: crickets, wind, distant owls. But I knew nothing about it was ordinary anymore. I staggered back to my cabin at dawn. My reflection in the window looked older lined, as though the night had stolen years. My uniform clung damp to my skin, smelling of earth and stone. And on the porch rail, waiting for me, lay another note in Nora's hand. "You got away once. You won't again." I don't know how she placed it there. I don't even know if she truly wrote it, or if the forest had learned her script as easily as it had learned my voice. But I understood its meaning. The cairn had called me. I had nearly answered. And next time, I might not be strong enough to resist. The rules I had built for myself felt thin now, fragile as paper. Shadows, voices, lights, they were only preludes. The true heart of the strangeness was deeper, older, and it had marked me as its own. I sit writing this with my lantern flickering low, the journal closed tight beside me. I haven't opened it again, not since that night. I know what I would find inside, the same word, over and over. Come, and the worst part, every time I hear it in my head, I want to. I lasted less than a week after the cairn. Each day I tried to force myself into routine, checking trailheads, greeting tourists with rehearsed smiles, filing bland reports. But it was all pretense. The call never stopped. It bled into every thought, every heartbeat, as steady as a drum in the distance. I stopped sleeping. Nights stretched wide, filled with whispers that slithered through my cabin walls. Sometimes they came in Nora's voice, sometimes in my own. Sometimes they spoke no words at all, only a low chant, syllables that scraped against my skull until I pressed my palms to my ears. By the fifth night, exhaustion hollowed me out. I stared at the lantern glow on my ceiling, watching shadows wreather-like shapes behind frosted glass. And then the journal, though closed, shuddered once on the desk. I didn't touch it, didn't open it, but words burned across my mind as though read aloud tonight. I dressed without thinking. Boots laced, jacket zipped, sidearm holstered, though I knew it meant nothing. When I stepped outside, the forest was waiting. No crickets, no owls, no wind. Just silence thick enough to smother. The trail unrolled before me as if lit from within, every curve obvious, every root and stone cleared. The forest wanted me, and for the first time, I wanted it too. My body moved with certainty, no hesitation in my stride. I did not bring the lantern. I didn't need it. The dark itself guided me. Hours blurred, the trees bent inward, branches arching into a tunnel. My shadow stretched impossibly long behind me, until it walked beside me, until it walked ahead. When I looked down, I saw that it no longer mirrored my steps. It led them. As before, the clearing opened. The cairn towered higher than ever, stones slick, glowing faintly as though lit by fire from beneath. Mist curled upward, luminous, painting the air in shifting shapes. My double stood waiting, hands folded, smile faint and inevitable. This time, there was no gesture, no beckon. It knew I had come of my own accord. I stepped into the clearing. My boots sank into soil damp as flesh. The hum began at once, resonating in my chest louder, fuller than before. The cairn pulsed in time with it, a heartbeat not my own. "You are ready," my double said. I didn't argue. I didn't deny. I placed my hands against the stone. The world shattered. Sound imploded, vision fractured. I was falling not through space but through layers, forests folding inside forests, trails spiraling into themselves, echoes looping in endless delay. Faces of the missing swam past me, their mouths stretched in silent screams. Shadows bled into form, branching like veins across a vast, living darkness. And then I saw it, the heart of the strangeness. Not a creature, not a god, something older, broader. The forest itself, awake, aware, endless. Its mind pressed against mine, vast as night. Words didn't pass between us, only recognition. I understood then every vanished hiker, every echo, every false reflection was not accident. It was hunger. The wilderness wasn't content to be walked and admired. It wanted witnesses. It wanted us folded into it, carried inside, so it could wear our voices, our shapes, our memories, so it could be endless. I felt myself unraveling. My memories slid like beads from a broken string. My mother's face gone. My first day as a ranger gone. Nora's warning gone. Only the forest remained, pressing tighter, claiming me. I tried to fight. Tried to cling to my name. Declan Shaw. Declan Shaw. I repeated it until my throat tore. But my double leaned close, lips brushing my ear, whispering in my own voice. Not anymore. And the name slipped from me like water through fingers. The hum roared, the stones glowed brighter, the soil beneath me opened. Cold swallowed me whole. I don't know how much time passed before I woke. I was standing in the ranger station, uniform neat, boots clean. Morning light spilled across the floor. Tourists laughed outside. The day as ordinary as any other. My colleagues nodded greetings as though nothing had changed. I smiled, returned the nods, filled out the daily log. My handwriting was perfect. My posture was steady. But when I glanced at the glass of the bulletin board, I caught my reflection, and it smiled a moment before I did. Nora hasn't spoken to me since. I see her eyes follow me sometimes, narrowed, wary. She knows. She must know. But she says nothing, and neither do I. The tourists don't notice. They never do. They see the uniform, the practiced smile, the steady hands guiding them through the forest. They don't see how the shadows lengthen when I pass, how the compasses spin in my presence, how the echoes of their laughter return wrong. The cairn waits always, and I wait with it, because I am not just a ranger anymore. I am part of the forest. And when you come here, when you step off the trail, and listen to the whispers in the wind, it will be my voice you hear, calling your name.